So how do you make this, or even this completely out of duct tape? Hey there guys, and welcome to the next video here on the DuctTapeStuff channel. This video is going to be a comprehensive guide on decorating with duct tape. We're going to talk about the various techniques on how to do it, as well as a few demonstrations, as well as all the tools that you're going to need to create designs just like this 100% out of duct tape. So I hope you guys like the video, and let's get started on what kind of tools you're going to need. So to make complex decorations out of duct tape, we don't need a whole lot of tools, but there are about 5 or 6 main core things that you need if you're going to make something as complex as, say, the sonic wallet, which I can show you here. Let's start off with the most basic thing, and that is a cutting mat, which you can see underneath the workstation here. Now, cutting mats come in a variety of different sizes. Sometimes they're also called rotary cutting mats. You basically want one that is probably double-sided so that you're able to cut on both sides, and it'll last a lot longer because once you're done with one side, you can flip it over to the other side so that both sides wear evenly. And you're going to need one that probably has a built-in ruler, which you can see here with the grid pattern. That will just save you a lot of trouble when you're trying to measure out different strips. The next thing is a hobby knife. Now, a hobby knife and a cutting mat go together like peanut butter and jelly. A hobby knife is basically just a blade with a handle, and it allows you to cut through tape directly onto your cutting mat, and it allows you to cut it nice and crisply so that it's able to cut through the tape and on nice clean lines, and that'll really help you out. So hobby knives you can get a variety of different places. You just want to make sure that it's nice and sharp when you're using it, and that'll go great with your cutting mat here. The next thing you're going to need is a pair of scissors. Now, you won't exactly need a pair of scissors to cut out a lot of the actual designs, but it is helpful if you're cutting out a lot of tape which isn't necessarily stuck onto your cutting mat. Now, on the channel I've been using titanium nonstick scissors by Westcott for several years now. It's what you've seen in all my videos, and they're really nice because they don't get all gunked up with the adhesive, which if you've used scissors with duct tape before, you've definitely noticed how gunked up with adhesive the blades can get. So those are a huge asset when you're working with making designs. Now, I include a ruler in this list because it kind of allows you to measure things that aren't exactly going to line up on the cutting mat. I mean, the cutting mat is definitely nice if you have that grid pattern and the ruler kind of built in, but it doesn't exactly work if you're trying to measure with various angles as you're working on something. So a ruler that you can move around the workstation is definitely a huge piece to have. It'll definitely help you out when you're trying to work on some of the more complex designs. The next thing you're going to need is an actual printout of whatever design you're making. So you can go on to Google Images, that's what I usually do, type in whatever you want, pull it into a Word document, I can resize it in a Word document, and then I can print it out on my printer. So if I were making the Sonic the Hedgehog wallet here, I would print out the picture of Sonic to that exact size. And that's where the next thing comes in, which is the packaging tape. So you take the color of whatever you want, you stick it down, you put the piece of paper on top of it, and you use your clear packaging tape to seal it onto the cutting mat. That pretty much keeps it just stuck down onto the mat. It prevents the paper from moving around at all when you're cutting it. And then you take your cutting mat and you would simply trace around whatever design you're trying to do, say the blue part. So I stick that down with the paper on top, and I cut out that exact design, peel everything up, and I'd have just the blue part left on the cutting mat. So that the packaging tape is definitely essential. I made a whole bunch of designs for years without actually using the packaging tape, and it would have saved me a lot of time if I used the packaging tape when I first started out. So those are pretty much all the tools that you're going to need: a printout, the packaging tape, a pair of scissors, a ruler, and a hobby knife. So let's move on to some actual designs on how to make something like this with the technique. Alright, so here's a demonstration on how to cut something out using the packaging tape with the printout and the actual duct tape stuck on the mat. Now, one of the questions I always get on the channel is how do you cut out circles completely and without any corners or without breaking the blade on your hobby knife here. So I'm actually going to use this as my printout, so you're going to pretend that this is kind of whatever you printed out and you're going to cut it out on the duct tape here. So we stick that down, then we're going to take our packaging tape, and that of course is going to seal up this circle or whatever you printed out all the way around. And the packaging tape is nice because it's completely clear. You can see exactly what you're trying to cut out, but it's also nice and thin, so it's really easy to cut through with your hobby knife as long as it's sharp and you use a little bit of pressure. So when you're trying to cut something out, you want to use the correct angle. You don't want it to be a too steep of an angle, but you also don't want it so that your kind of hand is hitting the cutting mat. So when I'm cutting out a circle, I'm going to start right about here, and you're going to cut it just a little bit at an angle, and then you're going to stop and you're going to readjust and keep going. Now this is going to be easier the larger the circle is, but you definitely don't want to cut it with one giant motion. Like, don't try to cut half the circle with one arm motion, because it's basically just going to break the tip of your blade off inside, and then your cutting ability is going to be reduced because it won't be as sharp. Now don't be kind of upset if you do end up breaking the blade, because I've been doing this since I was 13 and I've broken more than my fair share of blades inside the duct tape before. So it does happen. Practice does make perfect. If there's any advice I could give you for this entire video, it's practice does make perfect with whatever you're trying to do. So we're going to rip it out just like this, and we should have, as long as I cut it appropriately, this blade might be getting a little dull, and we're going to peel it up and we'll have our perfect circle. So that's kind of how you cut out something using the printout and the packaging tape method with your hobby knife. Alright, so now let's discuss the two different methods that I named on the channel a little while back on how to actually make the wallets that you can see here. Basically, there are two different methods that I use. One of them I named layering decoration and the other called puzzle decoration. Now they're definitely well named. The layering decoration uses layers and the puzzle decoration kind of fits together like a puzzle, so not too difficult to figure out. So Buttercup and the New Orleans Saints logo here are perfect examples of layering decoration. You start with kind of a backdrop, which on Buttercup here would be the entire black outline of her, and then you stick different pieces onto it like a sticker. You're kind of just sticking on the beige parts, part of her eyes, her socks and her shoes, as well as this piece here. All that is kind of stuck onto that main background, which allows it to look like that. It kind of allows the image to pop out, almost like a pop art image. The same is true for the New Orleans Saints logo. You can see that black outline of the fleur-de-lis. That's one giant layer, and then I made the gold layer, the white layer, and then of course the black one in the center. So that allows it, that cool layering effect, which you can see there. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. The puzzle decoration is a little more complicated. It's usually a little bit harder than layering decoration, and it includes cutting out a whole bunch of different pieces and sticking them together like a puzzle. The hardest part with this is that you're trying to cut out everything to be exact. You're pretty much making your own puzzle, and puzzle pieces have to fit together perfectly. So you have the blue part here, which is completely separate, then you have the white part, and then there's actually a tiny little blur between the blue and the white parts of his eye that you can barely see. It's just barely covered up, overlapped by just the slightest little bit. The part of his ear is, of course, stuck on. That's just layering decoration, but the rest of it is actually pieced together like a puzzle onto the entire thing here. Now it doesn't exactly, one isn't better than the other. There's basically just two different ways of making it, and you can figure out which one is best depending on which image you're making out of duct tape. So now let me show you layering decoration with a demonstration. So I cut out two different pieces of duct tape, one purple, one green, with the letter J to give you an example. So this would be our background image. On this wall, for an example, it would be the black fleur-de-lis, the border line that you see all the way around it. And then what I did is I cut out a second J, which is of course the lime green tape, which is slightly smaller. So by sticking this directly on top is a perfect example of what layering decoration is. And I'm going to try to line it up so it's got enough of a border all the way around, at least as much as I can. So there you go. That's basically layering decoration in a nutshell. Now if I were to make two more J's and cut them significantly smaller, it would actually look exactly like the fleur-de-lis logo on the wallet here. So that's a perfect example of layering decoration. Now let's move on to puzzle decoration. So to show you puzzle decoration, I actually cut out two different colors of duct tape with the capital letter A, and I'm going to show you exactly how this is done. So what I did is I cut them into two different designs, but each one is cut exactly the same way as the other, which in different ways. So using the two pieces, I'm going to fix them together exactly like a puzzle to show you exactly how it works. So I'm not overlapping at all, I'm just kind of edging it right up to the border of the other piece. And that exactly kind of shows you how this is done. So I'm going to get the other side here, which is of course also with the black. This one's going to go right about there. And since these are exactly cut to be the same, they're going to line up perfectly. And then let's put the last piece of the dragon tape right about here. Alright, so there you go. See, there you can see the letter A. It's used 2 different kinds of duct tape, and it's a perfect example of puzzle decoration. That nothing's layered, it's just stuck together like a puzzle to make it look like a complete image. Alright, so that's pretty much going to wrap up this video on how to decorate with duct tape using different techniques and tricks that I've used over the years. If I give you just a few tips before we leave, always try to keep your hobby knife blade sharp. It's pretty much the cause of so many problems if your blade isn't sharp at all. So you always want to replace it with a new blade if it gets to be really dull. There are a few ways of sharpening it with a sharpening stone if you have one of those, or you can just invest in several packets of new blades, and then of course you'll never run out. But always tend to look at your blade to see if it's been kind of chipped off at the tip, or if it needs to be replaced if it's getting kind of dull. As I said before earlier in the video, practice makes perfect. That's probably the best advice I can give you for this video. When I first started, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing, and there was no way I could have made anything close to these wallets up here. But after practice, after time of working with it, I was really able to get a feel for it, and well, you can see the results of all my hard-earned work and practice. So, hope you guys liked the video. There'll be more tutorials and videos coming to the channel pretty soon. Catch you next time. Hope you liked it.